People have been asking me for my opinion on this game since I made my huge Halo 4 review. Is Halo Infinite a diamond in the rough that needs time to be polished and fixed? Or is it a lump of coal that is broken from the start? Do I hate it, or do I enjoy it? Does it make me sad and feel despair towards the franchise? Does it make me seethe with rage? Or does it give me some hope that Halo can be the franchise that it once was? Halo Infinite, to me, is hilarious.
Not only is it hilarious, but it might be some of the best, most chaotically hilarious content I've gotten in a long time. Games like Halo 4 and 5, they're just depressingly bad. You look at it, you feel kinda disgusted, and you look away. But with Infinite, it's just a black hole of failure and malicious game design that it loops all the way around into becoming funny.
Halo Infinite is so fucking funny to me.
Everything about this game, to the controversy surrounding it, has me giggling to myself at just everything that led to this moment, and all the morons who failed to see the train coming and just stood on the tracks. This is Lucy faking Charlie Brown with the football twice, then promising this time she won't do it again, only for her to do it at the last second and for Charlie Brown to miss and fall on his ass even harder than before. It's the punchline to a joke that began almost a decade ago. A joke that took so long to set up, and now that it's finished, now that we got the punchline, it is hilarious. I can't help but appreciate just how funny this game is. Hey, as we all know, comedy works in threes. I think the reason I'm not as upset or heartbroken as most other people is that Halo is already dead. Like, I saw it die 10 years ago. We held the funeral. You guys are just late to the party after finding out Grandpa Joe died. Buddy, he's been dead for years. Where have you been? Are you just realizing this now? Where's all this emotion coming from? Did you guys seriously try and ignore the fact that Halo was dead all this time? Did you really convince yourselves that it could be resuscitated? This is just hilarious to me. Anyway, I know why you guys are here. Infinite is a shit show. So before we get too far into that, let's start with the basics. With me, with Halo, and with the killer themselves. I have a strong history with Halo. I grew up with it. It showed me that games could have engaging stories, beautiful vibrant worlds, and that shooting at aliens was awesome. Yeah, those were the days. Everything from its campaign, its multiplayer, to every little nugget of lore in between, Halo shaped my view of games forever. Honestly, if I could point to one single game that had the largest impact on me, it'd be Halo 1. It was just that influential. But fast forward to today, with Bungie long gone and an imposter studio in its place. 343 desperately trying to shape this brand into something of their own and failing every single step of the way. Almost like Halo was just fine the way it was, and now that we have some poser trying to make it less, Halo by watering it down for casuals, we're starting to see that maybe that doesn't work. This is their MO. Halo 4 sucked, Halo 5 sucked, and now Halo Infinite, which also sucks. And what I find even more hilarious is that by sheer coincidence, as of the writing of this video, it looks like the community is once again in flames due to 343 once more dropping all expectations. When I made my Halo 4 video, I never really thought I'd cover Infinite. Then after people liked it, I thought, hey, maybe I'll do a little review video on it, then call it a day. But wow, after all of this stuff that has happened and all of my thoughts finally bubbled to the surface, yeah, there's a lot to talk about for this game, and I just have to get it out there. It's been a long road, getting from there to here. After an arduous march of more than a decade, we finally reached the culmination of 343's Halo. What was supposed to be the final comeback to save the series, a final effort to redeem years of mistakes and stumbles, ended up being quite possibly one of the biggest blunders of them all. Something that I genuinely think in years to come will be pointed back to as the breaking point of this franchise, of the entire Halo brand. Halo will not recover from this. I believe that. And to figure out exactly what went wrong, we gotta dissect this thing piece by piece. Think of this as an autopsy. We have to figure out how Halo Infinite died and who the killer was. So before I can even touch this game, we need to discuss how we got here in the first place.
Man, where do we start?
I did a recap of Halo 1 through 3, ODST, and Reach when discussing Halo 4, but to summarize, Bungie were done with Halo since 2007. Like, they were done with the whole series.
We want this to be the Return of the King. We want this to be the final chapter in an epic trilogy.
After they made 3, they were out. However, they were locked in with Microsoft to make 2 more games, hence why ODST was very much a Halo 3 asset flip, and why both it and Reach were prequels. Bungie were done with Halo. The story was ended, they wanted to move on, and the only reason they were sticking around was because they were stuck in a contract with Microsoft. During this time, 343 was quickly thrown together by Microsoft to keep the series going. But they were a little afraid that Halo would become too niche. Remember, this was the late 2000s, just barely getting to the early 2010s. It was the era of brown and gray military shooters, the era of COD. So 343 were formed out of a bunch of developers who hated the idea of Halo and didn't really care for it. They were brought to water it down, make it something more generic and lame, just to appeal to the lowest common denominator.
We knew we wanted to expand the audience as far as we could and redefine that core loop, to not make it like Halo 2 or like Halo 3 or something in the middle, but make it Halo 4.
And for all the people who think that the idea of 343 being a bunch of people who hate Halo is just a myth, no, this is real. Microsoft really tried this. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it from Microsoft's standpoint. When they were making Halo 4, they wanted it to compete with Call of Duty.
I look at the changes that we're making, and it really feels like we're making
Call of Duty, Black Ops 2.
And that's exactly what we're setting out to do.
Even though Halo had its own, slightly smaller fan base to deal with, Call of Duty was just a more incentivizing target. And Halo 4 sold pretty well. Not as well as Halo 3, but hey, at least it sold decently. But it tanked player count-wise. And if you want to know everything wrong with Halo 4, go watch my Halo 4 two-parter. Anyway, after this, people wisened up to 343's tricks, and by the time Halo 5 came around, a lot less people were interested. 343 were arrogant enough to keep making Halo into a generic, microtransaction-heavy Call of Duty clone, with this spirit of Halo completely squeezed out of it. They wanted the Call of Duty audience, but instead, as is the case for a lot of other game series that try this, that Call of Duty audience will simply move on to the next popular thing. They will literally never stick around with your game. Instead, they will go where the bandwagon takes them and you'll be left with nothing. Of course, if you were smart, you would have gone after the core fan base, who are gonna play your game decades after you release it. But 343 didn't do that. So hardcore Halo fans had nothing left except their old games. So they jumped ship. Honestly, it was right after the launch of Halo 5 that most of the Halo community had a weird collective sobering up, when the copium seemed to just run out. Countless spin-offs, tie-in products, all this stupid shit piling on, all for a game series that didn't even have a solid foundation anymore. It was too much for people to handle. So Halo 5's player count plummeted and people grew angrier and angrier with 343. Halo 5 honestly was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But don't get me wrong, it was a awful game. 343 added in a ton of microtransactions, the game was often broken, and on top of all of this, a ton of features were missing at launch, and as best as I can tell, are still missing to this day. Players were left with this ugly fucking game that had no resemblance with the Halos that came before it, and people were kind of maturing around this time. The Halo audience had grown up. People like me who had been kids during the early days were now finally kind of realizing what exactly was wrong with 343's Halo. We collectively gave up on Halo. Halo 5 withered and died. Content drop stalled, and the honeymoon period with 343 was all of a sudden over.
It sadly boiled down Halo into yet another mediocre shooter campaign like its competition.
There is no split-screen multiplayer at all.
Halo 5 Guardians won't have split-screen support, with 343 Industries saying it was a tough but necessary decision.
I wish there was split screen. I really did. I really wish there was split screen, because this is a feature I don't want to see die. Some of my favorite moments have been, when some friends and I get together on the couch and we will play a game in split screen.
Where is everything? Where's the variety? Where are the game modes that made us fall in love with Halo in the first place?
One of the core tenets of the Halo franchise now completely ripped out, with no warning, gone, removed.
And unsurprisingly, after nearly 50 minutes of searching, we couldn't find a game in virtually all the playlists while we were on Expanded.
And today I have spent fucking 50 minutes straight searching for a game of Halo.
But it's also broken. It gets worse with each new update. New bugs are added to the game, new UI problems are added to the game.
The campaign is easily the buggiest of the series. In the 5 hours I spent playing with 3 followers, 5 game-breaking glitches were encountered, and this is after the campaign had been patched.
Halo 5 has become the absolute running joke of the entire gaming community.
It's unknown what exactly transpired internally with 343 at this time, aside from a few contractors and former employees mentioning how toxic the company environment was.
But nonetheless, the negative outcry that had been circulating over 343's fumbling of Halo was loud enough for at least Microsoft to notice. Also during this time, Halo 6 was in the middle of development, likely just more of the same for 4 and 5. I'm guessing it would have been a linear, QuickTime event heavy, generic cinematic FPS with Prometheans and the Infinity and Spartan Locke and an evil Cortana. Its multiplayer probably would have been identical to 5, with just as many pay-to-win gimmicks and that same ugly Halo 4 and 5 art style.
However, with the community completely losing interest in Halo, development had to quickly restart to try and mend the ill will fans had towards 343. All of a sudden, Halo 6 was going to be a reboot. Okay.
This was a complete 180. Halo 6 was meant to be the trilogy cap. It was meant to be the end of 343's trilogy. Yet here they were flaunting this new game as some sort of return to form. Yeah, good attempt guys, if only this wasn't the last game in your trilogy to try this. Then an E3 trailer dropped, showing Master Chief and a forest and a Halo ring, and people started to get excited. Sure, everyone was still skeptical over 5 and MCC, things were still a little shaky, but hey, this trailer seemed to work a little. People convinced themselves that, hey, maybe Infinite is going to be alright. Maybe this is going to be where 343 turns Halo around. Maybe we'll get a proper Halo sequel that we've been waiting for since Bungie left. Hey, a return to the old art style, the cinematics look nice, maybe a return to Halo 1's simplicity. People were getting excited. Then another trailer dropped, showing equally nothing. But hey, we got more cinematics, more flashy cutscenes. Alright, people were starting to get hyped now. Maybe a little too hyped. At this point, no one had seen any gameplay. We hadn't even seen what the game was going to be like, yet people were already declaring that this game would be the best Halo game yet. Yeah, the hype bandwagon does things to people. It was also around this time that MCC got ported over to PC, where some of the cracks began to show. Netcode was still broken from the Xbox One port, bugs were numerous, and 343 were slowly updating it one game at a time. Again, I think most people just didn't care. Ready when it's ready, they kept repeating, even if at times it was unplayable.
Halo just came out on the PC, and it came out with a ton of game-breaking bugs, but the biggest one being that if you look at the floor, and another person is looking at the floor, anywhere in the map, it'll start hitting them. See, obviously I didn't hit anybody, but I killed that guy right there. Now I'm just getting kills just by sitting here shooting at the floor.
Vehicles now quite literally drive themselves. I'm not joking. This isn't a laggy server or anything. This is just a few minutes into a game. A Warthog develops its own AI, maybe as a consequence of MCC's bugs or something, and literally drives itself.
But you know, something we've been dealing with even longer than frame drops that still haven't been fixed is the dog shit hit detection, and the fucking ghost melees, and the getting shot through walls, and the terrible fucking desync in this game. We've been dealing with this for so long. How is this still a thing? This shit happens on LANs. This shit happens during tournaments. This may very well cost people games during a tournament. I've watched streams of people lose games because of bullshit.
People were definitely split on this. On one hand, it was nice to have the original games on PC finally, with stuff like FOV sliders, uncapped frame rates, and mods. On the other hand, it still wasn't a smooth experience. Lots of broken features, and more specifically, that one time where a 343 employee, Dursky, not just a Halo player, an employee paid by 343 working for them, went onto a live stream and mocked a video of somebody pointing one of these glitches out.
So, a bit of background. In February 2017, Bring Halo Back made a video about Halo 3's hit detection on the Xbox One. People were talking about it when the video came out. I saw it back then, and I didn't agree with everything he said, but I do think that the overall message of that video is pretty justified. The fact of the matter is, the shot registration on Halo 3 MCC is significantly worse than it was on the 360.
And I got my reticle so that it just barely turns red when I'm zoomed in, and as you can see, 5, 6... 7 shots. Takes 7 shots to kill him. And he shoots me 4 shots.
So I guess Ace was streaming, and he was playing with Dursky. And I guess they were sitting in lobby, and Dursky had recommended that Ace watch this video. So Ace opens up the video, he starts watching it, and you could kind of hear Ace and Dursky giggling in the background and talking shit.
Boom.
Boom.
Boom. It's just, that's how they are.
Boom. And it's pretty fucked up because they're both public figures. Ace is a huge Halo pro and has been for many years, and Dursky used to be a Halo pro and he's currently employed by 343 Industries.
Now, so right there, they're watching the part of the video where I show a few different clips where I'm shooting another player and my shots are not registering. I show 3 different examples of that. If they do not see any problem with that at all,
boom.
First thing he's hugging the wall.
I know.
Not near a wall. You're in the wall.
Doesn't even get hurt. Like I said,
boom.
Bloodshots always happened in Halo.
This is why people don't like Halo 3. It's because they're trash.
Now, if this were a video that was meant to display skill, like if it was a montage or a gameplay, then okay, you could have your opinion, but this video was made to illustrate a point. But the fact that Dursky works for 343, and he's on these Discords, and he's talking to people actively working to make MCC better, I'm just disappointed. I fully understand that companies talk shit about clients and customers all the time. It's human nature, it's ventilation. But Dursky, bro, you're on a live stream with probably hundreds of viewers, and you're laughing at a guy who's trying to make a difference. I mean, yeah, the guy's animated, he's obviously passionate about the game, and maybe you found it funny, but he doesn't. But the big takeaway from this video is that 343 does not give a fuck about this game.
Just having somebody that fucking delusional working at 343, that really does scare me, dude.
The Dursky incident seems to have been largely forgotten, however, I think it shouldn't. This was a mask-off moment for 343, where we got to see what was really going on inside that studio.
17,000 views.
I know. I had people coming to me like, yeah, can you watch this video? And this guy's shot registration shit. I was like, yeah, sure, let me see it. And I just started laughing literally, like, out loud at work. Just laughing.
Somebody at work showed you this?
Yeah, somebody was like, yeah, you should look into Halo 3 shot registration. I was like,
when was that?
Like, in, like, February.
So let me get this right. Somebody at work showed you my video and told you that you should look into the Halo 3 hit detection on MCC, and you just laughed it off. You just laughed it off as if it's not a real fucking issue. Is that the reason there's so many issues and bugs and things wrong with MCC? Because you guys don't actually think they're valid issues? I mean, is that what it is?
Anyway, people were more worried about Infinite. The hype was going, people kept making up rumors towards the game. You bet your ass there were tons of made-up rumors too. And then, in July of 2020, during the Microsoft conference, 8 minutes of Halo Infinite were shown. And oh boy, it looked awful. Lighting was terrible, textures were shockingly low quality. Look at this brute, lol. Oh jeez, I remember this part of the trailer being the worst, because they clearly wanted it to be that huge vista reveal shot that a lot of other open world demos have, except here the low draw distance and the hexagon pillars made it look hilariously bad, embarrassing even. This game kind of looks like shit. I think almost right away the copium started. So many awful signs, more info about the game were leaking, and this demo itself wasn't good. But the hype train was so heavy and had so much mass that a lot of people really tried to convince themselves otherwise. This is when the Halo community was collectively in the denial stage of grief. They tried their hardest to pretend that this wasn't looking awful, because it was. Don't convince yourself that it wasn't. It was so bad, in fact, that 343 delayed the game an entire year.
Uh-oh, that's not good.
Then more and more news about the game dropped. Bombshell after bombshell, multiplayer would be free to play, colors would be locked behind coatings, no co-op or Forge on launch.
Oh boy.
Again, even with these bombshells, the denialists kept their heads in the sand. People kept convincing themselves that despite all these problems, Infinite was going to be the best Halo game ever made. Yeah, people were really saying this. Then fast forward to summer of 2021. Halo Infinite launched its flights, which showed off massive bugs. The gameplay was broken, the combat sandbox was very bare bones, although, interestingly, the one thing that worked perfectly was the shop. Yeah, it was polished and everything. The writing was absolutely on the wall. However, these in-denial fans ignored all of this. The flight was amazing, they all lied through their teeth. This is the best Halo game ever, they kept saying. Some people actually said this, I'm serious. There was so much cope in the air that you could cut it with a knife. Then we hit Judgment Day. The game released. And eventually the campaign a month later. And oh shit, what a mess. It's been almost a year since the game has launched, and I'd wager most of the community has long since left the denial stage. Some are now into anger, a few are on bargaining, and I'd say quite a good percentage of you guys are in the depression stage. But for people like me, people who saw this bullshit coming a mile away, we accepted Halo Infinite would be shit a long time ago. We're already in the acceptance stage. You guys need to follow along. So what exactly is there to Halo Infinite? What about this game is broken and bad and terrible? Why is this probably going to be the last Halo game in a long while, perhaps ever, and maybe the final nail in this coffin of a franchise?
Well, buckle up, buckaroo, because you're in for a treat.
This video is merely part 1 of 2, a huge review of Infinite, where I go point by point in hopes that maybe I can convince you guys exactly what's wrong with this game and everything surrounding it. So this is part 1. And we're going to be talking exclusively about the single player, the campaign, the story, the open world, and part 2 will be all about the multiplayer, the live service content, and the community as a whole. Strap yourselves in, we're going in deep. With that out of the way, let's dive right into it. Let's drop right into hell.
So before I get all negative, what are some things that I like?
Well, I like the combat loop. In single player, I mean. Fighting AI enemies is fun, and unlike Halo 4 and 5, it actually feels a bit like Halo. Projectiles are slow moving, enemies telegraph their attacks, there's once again an importance in shield popping and headshots. Now, it isn't perfect. Matter of fact, I'll discuss it more later in the video because it has its problems, but in regards to shooting and killing aliens, this is the best combat 343 has done. Granted, that isn't exactly a high bar, but it's something. Designs are cool. I'll admit, weapon designs look a little bit like old school Halo. The enemy designs look great, they look very Halo 2 and Halo 3 inspired. Same goes for the Spartan armor too. We won't actually talk about how you acquire that Spartan armor because then we get into what's wrong with the game. So I'll save that for later. I also like how the story drops most of the subplots from 4 and 5. There are no stupid Prometheans, no Infinity characters, Latsky, Palmer, Locke, I'm pretty sure they all die off screen, or at least I hope they do, and they don't show up at all during the story. The fucking Infinity gets destroyed in the very opening cutscene. Fantastic. Bye! Hell, we get a single Spartan 4 in the entire campaign, so it's safe to say that pretty much all of them are dead, for all intents and purposes. The plotline from 4 and 5 were shit, and even though Infinite had to follow them, it at least didn't bother sticking with them. The whole subplot of Cortana leading a bunch of artificial intelligences against the universe was a dumb subplot, and they dropped that immediately. Matter of fact, Cortana dies off screen. Sorta. Although we do get one too many cutscenes showing her off in flashbacks. And yeah, her character's still pretty butchered here. 343 cannot be trusted to write Cortana without messing it up. But hey, for the most part, they dropped all those subplots. Now, some people were actually annoyed by this. We had 343 shills, legitimate Halo fans, complain that these characters were thrown out. But not me. I couldn't care less. Seeing that stupid, ugly-looking UNSC Infinity get ripped apart was pretty cathartic, knowing I'll never have to interact with Palmer or Latsky or Locke or anyone on board that ship again. That was a great feeling. The story stayed simple, and although it isn't great, it's still getting bonus points for not trying to shove in these characters.
And, that's it. That's my list of things I like with Infinite. The list of things I didn't like is a lot longer.
So to break down everything wrong with this game, I'm going to have to go into a lot of detail. So for this first part, I'm going to separate the video into two: plot and the single player itself. Oh yeah, welcome to the plot. The plot for Halo Infinite might be the most confusing, ass-backwards, hastily written mess I have ever seen for a video game. I'm serious. I have never seen a story structure this disjointed, this confusing, or this completely unintelligible, where even playing through the game multiple times, I still can't fully explain what's going on. I still keep forgetting what the overarching story is, because it changes every 5 fucking minutes. It manages to be both confusing and simplistic, overly complicated, but also stupidly bare bones. I must give it credit. I've never seen a game manage to do this. It's like a paradox in storytelling. I have no idea how 343 managed to pull this off. So let's start with the story itself. The story goes nowhere. I think that's my ultimate problem with Halo Infinite's story. It literally goes nowhere. The whole game has only like 3 characters and then a bunch of generic brute bad guys, and that's it. Nothing happens. From start to finish, our characters are barely in a different place than where they started. Like, yeah, the pilot guy's a little happier and new Cortana's a little more experienced, but shit is still the same. The UNSC is still defeated, the Banished still control most of the Halo ring. Hell, we only managed to kill the guy who was like, maybe second in command? Atriox is still fucking alive. We never got to fight him again. Wow. Also, we killed one alien of a new species we had no previous knowledge over, even though the rest of our species is now presumably gonna wake up. Great, what a true impact we had on the world. That's what I'm trying to say. This story is literally nothing. It's actually kind of a feat in storytelling. To have all this production value, bombastic music, decent voice acting, well-scripted cinematics, only to have it serve a plot that doesn't go anywhere. Seriously, you keep thinking I'm exaggerating, but nothing happens in this game. I don't know how else to explain it. We get our ass kicked to Sunday in the opening cinematic, we get revived 6 months later, we blow up a Banished ship, we land on the ring, and then the entire game is spent wandering from boring Banished outpost to outpost, going to Forerunner facilities, meeting characters, promptly killing those characters, or just getting teased by the Harbinger or Escharum until you kill both of them. There you go. I just spoiled Halo Infinite. I'm not kidding. Replaying this, I finally get the idea that this game's plot is truly phoned in, out of what I'm guessing was a complete backtrack on 343's part to try and salvage this game. This isn't the story that you would come up with if you planned your game out long in advance and had ideas of where it would go, how future games might tie into it, or even how it might wrap up existing plot threads in a clear and satisfying manner. No, this game does not have a well-rounded structure. It doesn't have a structure in the first place. It doesn't have a cast of characters, nor an interesting conflict or series of rising actions and climaxes. It just has one strung together meander through the same plot beats repeated over and over until there's a boss fight, and the game just ends. What? Wait, what? Are we done? Is it over? This is the kind of story that feels like it was whipped together in a writer's room to simply have something, anything, ready before a deadline. This feels like the first couple episodes of, say, a TV show. Like a really slow start to a new season, where the Master Chief wakes up, befriends a Marine, and goes on a little quest with a new AI. Like, this is the lead up to the real story that we're waiting for. There's not even any rising action either. For the most part, we're doing the same thing over and over, with the same one Marine pilot and the weapon who totally isn't Cortana. Like, there's not even a turning point in the game where the stakes change and our entire narrative shifts. Like, the famous Halo plot shift never happens here. Like, this is something that every old Halo game used to have, where halfway through the game, the stakes would rise. There would be a brand new goal, some new huge imposing obstacle we'd have to overcome, and the rest of the game would be turned on its head. In Halo 1, it's when the Flood show up, and we realize that there's way more to the Halo ring than we previously thought. Or in Halo 2, it's when the elites are betrayed and the Gravemind launches his assault on High Charity. Or in Halo 3, when the portal to the Ark is activated, Cortana's message and humanity and the elites have to go through the portal knowing the Gravemind is coming after them. Hell, even Halo Reach has a turning point, where the rest of the Covenant fleet show up in orbit and the planet's destruction is now inevitable. Hilariously, the one game that didn't really have this, I'd argue, was Halo 3 ODST. Now, I love ODST. It's a fine little side story with great atmosphere and fun gameplay, but I'll be honest, its story goes nowhere. It's just a meandering path from side story to side story in a semi-open world that then awkwardly cuts to linear levels before the game then ends unsatisfyingly to tease another game. Oh my god, Halo Infinite is just ODST again. But do you know what ODST ended on? A tease for Halo 3. We weren't unsatisfied with the end of Halo 3 ODST, Because Halo 3 already came out years earlier, with a huge climactic conclusion to the Halo trilogy. We already knew how the conflict would end, because it already ended. Also, ODST wasn't the mainline game in the series. It was a small little expansion that used assets from Halo 3 to rush its development in time, just so Bungie could get out of its contract with Microsoft. Halo Infinite is a pseudo reboot that took 6 years to make and was advertised as a brand new adventure for the series. Yet it had none of that. Just more meandering and wandering and no stakes. Not even like a twist or something like every other Halo game has. We needed that moment in Infinite. We needed the oh shit moment. Like, what if the Flood showed up on Zeta Halo, and now it's a matter of trying to stop both the Banished and the Flood? Or, hey, clearly 343 doesn't want to spend money on huge set pieces and cinematic moments. What if we learn the ring is now operational, and Escharum plans to use it? Except since it's so damaged, it will just rip the ring apart. Kind of like the end of Halo 3. So now it's a race against the clock to stop it from activating. Maybe have the ground shake, pieces of the scenery break off. You could have a super cool skybox where the ring's energy is accumulating slowly in the center. Hey, I'm just spitballing for a real third act. That's better than the actual third act that we're given, which is nothing. No, instead the huge race against the clock moments in this game are, we need to stop the ring, not from activating, not from being repaired, but instead we have to stop the machine that collects materials that will then eventually be used to repair the ring. Whatever the hell that means.
The structure's purpose is simple. Rebuild the ring. Well, more specifically, create the materials needed to repair it.
Wait, materials? You mean like metal? Where are you gonna get that with that tiny little floating tower? I always thought the planet in the center of the Ark in Halo 3 was kind of like a mining planet. You can see it chiseled out on one side, like all the materials needed to build a Forerunner structure require a planet to harvest from. But where the fuck is this thing getting its materials? Is Zeta Halo gonna cannibalize itself to try to rebuild itself? Does that even work? Who cares? We're just gonna blow this thing up anyway, to stop it from doing something, I guess. I still don't know. But yeah, there's no clear stakes. Like, what the fuck are we doing? The UNSC lost 6 months ago. There's no super weapon about to destroy Earth or wipe out the galaxy. Our Halo ring is literally destroyed. Best I can tell, both the UNSC and the Banished are stranded here, which, hey, could be a neat premise if the game actually focused on that. Show us interacting with Marines, rebuilding outposts, recollecting weapons and vehicles. Have a scene where a bunch of Marines are strategizing. Maybe Master Chief walks in. You can have a cool moment where all the Marines look at him, all awestruck. Oh shit, the Master Chief is alive? Oh shit, look at that, it's the Master Chief. Look how cool he is. Those are wonderful little moments from Halo. Being able to see how the Marines reacted to you, and just being able to see the structure of the UNSC itself. Give me that moment where a bunch of Marines finally regather their numbers and decide to go on the offensive to take out a banished fort. This is basic stuff. I'm not kidding when I say there literally isn't a single Marine in any of the cutscenes aside from Mr. Pilot Guy over here. Aside from the opening cinematic, Master Chief does not interact once with any Marine or any other UNSC officer, which presumably there has to be at least someone out there command-worthy. If not, then I guess Chief would assume control. In which case, show us him interacting with Marines, giving them battle strategies, outlining the mission. I just want my Marines, man. Is that too much to ask? Hey, if we're stranded here, give us some missions where we're looking for ships to commandeer. We know the pilot is looking for FTL drives. Show us more of that. Show Marines trying to hijack and repurpose banished vehicles. Or better yet, how about a mission where we try and board a banished ship to take it over? It took one Master Chief to blow up an entire ship. I'm sure one Master Chief alongside an army of Marines could easily hijack one too. But again, the game has no idea what direction to point itself in. It wants the bombastic cinematic story with epic music and huge deep moments. Oh my god, it's the Harbinger, isn't this scene epic? Oh my god, it's the Banished, isn't this scene epic? Yet the actual stakes and setting is a completely different tone. A small band of Marines slowly trying to rebuild their forces, a gang of banished and mercenaries, both stranded on a damaged Halo ring. This type of story feels like it'd be better if it focused on the atmosphere. Like super atmospheric, quiet exploration. Scenes where it's more about surviving than simply stopping a Deus Ex Machina. Hey, if the game focused on this and the whole plot revolved around them trying to escape the ring, I'd be all in. Because with that story, at least there'd be a clear end goal and we know what we're trying to do. Now, it would definitely be different for Halo, which unlike what my Halo 4 review makes me out to be, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to a different story structure in a Halo game. Hey, There are plenty of smaller side stories in the Halo universe that this type of game could work with. So long as you don't try to retcon the canon with changing the Forerunners or messing with the universe, I don't care. But nah, boring plotless story that goes nowhere. Literally nowhere. The entire game is spent waiting not for a climax, but for simply knowing what the climax is. Like the entire game, I sat there wondering, okay, but when are we going to get to the meat of the game? When are we going to get a clear objective and goal? But that never arrives. Instead, it just ends abruptly without us doing barely anything. I mean, we killed that lady, but was it really an accomplishment? She wasn't even about to activate Zeta Halo. Remember, Zeta Halo is still broken. Instead, we were literally trying to stop her from sending a communication to somewhere else.
She's trying to open a connection between here and somewhere else on the ring.
Huh. I don't think I even knew quite what was going on when I fought her the first time. I think I saw her doing these weird glowy lights and I'm like, oh, she's doing something bad. I gotta kill her. We literally killed the Harbinger because she was finishing her text message. What happened to the big epic set pieces of old Halo? What happened to blowing up the Halo ring, or stopping a Halo ring from firing, or destroying the Ark? Where's my damn Warthog run? This game hurts me because it doesn't have any semblance of a well-structured story. No build-up, no rising action, no climax, none of that. Just a bunch of gobbledygook before you realize, oh, we're at the end of the game, I guess? This is epic, I think? I also love how nothing gets tied up at the end. No explanation of the Endless, or the Harbinger, or the fact that we may have fucking traveled in time.
Where are we?
Chief, I think the better question is when are we?
Yeah, that literally gets glossed over. I have no idea what we managed to accomplish, but hey, the game says we did something. Again, this is the first few episodes of a TV show. Actually, this is like the first 4 missions of Halo Combat Evolved. Plot-wise, it's the exact same. Human ship gets attacked, lands on a Halo ring, human survivors band together to form a resistance, your friend gets captured, so you have to go rescue him. Then you find out that the bad guys are looking for something else on the ring, but you don't know what yet. Seriously, that's it. Plot-wise, this isn't even half the story Halo 1 has. Halo Infinite literally ends on the Silent Cartographer mission in Halo Combat Evolved. That's how little plot this game has. I mean, story-wise, we are just barely in the second act, with no sense of stakes, no goal, and barely an understanding of what's going on. But yeah, Halo Infinite's plot. What an accomplishment. I would talk about the characters, but there's like 3 of them. One is a guy who's literally meant to be a player stand-in, so technically 2. I mean, you could call the Brutes and the Evil Elites characters, but do you really? Escharum is just an evil bad guy who growls and makes speeches and is basically a mustache-twirling villain. Same goes for his subordinates, which, hey, you know what? I wouldn't mind if the game didn't treat the story like it was some dramatic emotional plot. Like if this game had the tone of Halo 1, yeah, I'd be down. Not this, however. This is a story that tries to be taken seriously, or at least emotionally seriously. Halo 1, and the rest of the Halos for that matter, 2 and 3, didn't have a scene where a guy sits in the grass and cries for 10 minutes while Master Chief comforts him. Again, not saying earlier Halo games didn't have emotional moments, but they never dipped into melodrama. As I said in my Halo 4 video, 343 loves their fucking melodrama. I will say it's tolerable for the most part, until 2 moments in the game, where not Cortana gives you the fucking pouty talkback, and when the pilot breaks down. Yeah, these moments are terrible.
Crushed. Broken. Beaten. Useless.
Stow the belly aching, soldier. Remember, you're a leatherneck.
Otherwise, the characters are just kind of boring. Everyone splooged themselves over the pilot during the E3 teaser. Oh my gosh, the emotions! I love this character! And he turned out to just be kind of, Not Cortana borders on annoying. I get what they were trying to do, like, you can't do real Cortana, she's borderline evil in this timeline, so reintroduce what's basically a brand new Cortana, who's naive and inexperienced. I'm guessing it's just the writing that annoys me, because her dialogue is so bad to listen to. Her lines are just annoying.
Oh, wait, you're being sarcastic. He's fun, I like him.
I like this monitor, even if he is just a Guilty Spark ripoff. I will say it's pretty hilarious how in the span of a few minutes they introduce a monitor who acts all friendly and then he immediately becomes a boss. Halo 1 at least waited a couple levels for that. But let's get to our villains, the Banished. Like I said earlier, the Banished are kind of fun, just in the sense that they're cheesy bad guys. I like this guy.
Welcome to my tower, Master Chief.
Escharum could have been fun if they played up him being a failed second in command. Like he's this failure of a leader who got his army stuck on Zeta Halo, and with Atriox gone, he's looking for a fight to cement his name as a warrior, but he just acts like a motivationless bad guy. Same goes for most of the other Banished leaders for that matter. I like the concept of the Banished, I think a little more than the Banished themselves. A ragtag ex-Covenant group who are there to pillage and cause chaos, as opposed to the more strategic religious empire they broke away from. A neat new inclusion to Halo, and unlike the Prometheans in Halo 4 and 5, they do fit Halo's military sci-fi aesthetic. A cool idea, at least. And hey, I think they have a little bit of personality to them. I like how they're more similar to humanity than we initially think. They hate the Covenant, they hate the Prophets, but they also have their own goals. Sort of like Warhammer, the enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend. However, the game uses them as Covenant stand-ins, but makes them weaker. Covenant, but instead of being led by supremely intelligent zealots, it's by a bunch of bumbling warlords. Hey, again, if the plot of this game revolved around simply surviving on Zeta Halo and trying to get ourselves off ring, I would be totally down. But it's not. Instead, it's treating the Banished like they're this galactic threat, when their fucking leader is able to go missing and his main fleet is stranded on a Halo ring. Lastly, the Harbinger is, I don't even know. I mean, she's a bad guy, she spouts platitudes, that's about it. Okay, who are the Endless? Like, seriously, who are they? I'm asking because I don't know. The game never told me who they are, nor why I should be afraid of them, because they are apparently a threat in the Halo universe, but we're never told why. So even though I've played this campaign multiple times, I still don't have a fucking clue what the Endless are. Of course, I'm not saying the game has to spell it out for me step by step. Halo 1 introduces the Covenant just out of nowhere and lets the player kind of infer things throughout the game. However, you at least understand the danger they possess. I mean, the second you see them, they're shooting at you. That's no good. And they managed to take down a human ship and took the captain prisoner. That's also no good. So through Halo 1, you get the impression that there's some sort of military hierarchy of multiple alien races, with at least some sort of religious connection to the Halo ring itself. So I was at least expecting that with the Endless. We get a tease of the Harbinger early in the game with what I imagine is some sort of Forerunner storage device for either preserving living creatures or perhaps just their DNA, since we got a glimpse of it earlier. Like, this is a cool little lore piece. We know the Forerunners were able to reseed the galaxy full of life after the Halo ring's activation. So we know that they have the ability to store alien species through some means, so it was kind of cool to see it. But throughout the game, we don't really get any sense of what this Harbinger lady even wants, or what the Endless even wanted for that matter. And of course, I know people in the comments are gonna pester me about the lore that was explained outside the game's main story. I know that, but I don't care about the spin-off books or the graphic novels. Once upon a time, you could play a Halo game and not have to read text logs or supplemental material to understand what's going on. So best I can tell, with what the game tells me, is that the Harbinger hates humanity, and the Forerunners too, and is somehow a threat. Even if she's not really that special from other Covenant, and the only real thing I've seen her do is teleport. I guess that's handy. But yeah, we get no explanation of the Endless, or the Harbinger. And then at the end, we get a teaser for even more Endless. Bum, bum, bum. It is painfully obvious 343 tried to backtrack when writing Infinite's story. Remember their Reclaimer trilogy? But seriously, the more you look at concept art for this game and see all the ideas 343 had for Halo 6, I get the impression that Infinite's plot was completely whipped up, all half-assed just to have a story ready before the game launched. I can almost guarantee that when we saw that trailer back in 2018, Halo Infinite literally had no story. My big guess for what Halo 6 was meant to be was probably just more Halo 5. I can guarantee it was not meant to be open world, it wasn't meant to be some sort of reboot, and it absolutely wasn't going to drop 343's dogshit art style in favor of something more older and more classic. No, I'm just going off on a whim. I think this game was meant to be a linear Halo 5/4-esque campaign, with levels hopping between planets and locales until finally the last few missions would take place on Zeta Halo and you'd face off against Cortana herself. Some other things that I genuinely believe for this game: I don't think the Banished were at all meant to be in Halo 6. The reason I say this is because the Banished were introduced in Halo Wars 2, an RTS spin-off game. Yeah, that's how I'd introduce my main villain for the ending of my trilogy, as I'd introduce them in another game, show them to be bumbling dumbasses in that game, and then all of a sudden in Halo 6 I'll have them be the big new threat that is completely disproportional to what we saw before. Remember, Halo Wars 2 released right in the middle of development for Halo 6, and that game teased a potential Halo 5 crossover, and possibly a lead-in to Halo 6, but it did so by basically showing that the Banished and the crew of Spirit of Fire are basically stuck on the Ark. How Atriox managed to fly his ass all the way back to Zeta Halo, I have no clue. That beats me. People have speculated that the Banished were just an afterthought, quickly brought into Halo Infinite because there was no fun enemy faction to fight. Like, you had the rogue elites and grunts and jackals from Halo 4 and 5, but those guys were lame. People hated them. You also had the Prometheans, which I don't think anybody liked outside of a few 343 shells.
I mean, naturally occurring Halo 4 and 5 enjoyers.
So the Banished it is, a mostly brute-led faction with chunky tech and weaponry. Kind of a throwback to the brutes in Halo 3. But people liked the Banished in Halo Wars 2. However, I think it was mainly just a desperate grasp for anything that wasn't 343 Halo. Because 343 Halo was hot garbage. Take it or leave it, I guess. But that's what I think Halo Infinite was meant to be. Honestly, probably not too different to Halo 5. You probably would have fought more Prometheans, maybe teamed up with the elites, but even then that's questionable, since we all know 343 never gives Halo fans the things that they simply want. It probably would have had a really bad ham-fisted story where Cortana tries to take over the galaxy, again, just like Halo 5. Instead of that, however, 343 had to do their infamous 180. If it isn't obvious already, this game's story was totally reworked, if not borderline fully rewritten in the middle of development. As I said before, the original plot for Infinite was, best I can tell, probably just Halo 5 2.0. It would have had the same structure, maybe the same characters, and it would have just been a standard continuation. But as I said before, this game was developed right during what I like to call the cataclysmic wake-up. Some people tolerated Halo 4, even though they shouldn't have. But when Halo 5 launched, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Its campaign was horrible. The plot made no sense, characters were awful, everybody hated it, and people collectively began shitting on it from its release to long after. Even to this day, people still rant about Halo 5. So Halo 6 had to drop everything from Halo 4 and 5, at least as much as it could. But because since it was a sequel, there really wasn't much it could do. It had to both fit as a reasonable sequel to 5, as well as work as a pseudo reboot to Halo 1, 2, 3, and even Reach. Of course, realistically, I think Halo should have just had a straight up reboot. That would have been preferable to what we got. Something akin to Resident Evil 7's complete dismissal of everything 6 and potentially 5. Just leave it vague and untouched and just do a full clean slate. I think in the hands of smart writers, this totally could have been done. And it probably would have been better too. Would have worked as a reboot, but no. We're getting the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker treatment, where the previous two entries of the new trilogy were so bad, we have to do a 180. Address everything previously established while awkwardly trying to create entirely new stakes for the sequel, even though it's meant to be the last in the trilogy, to just try and appeal towards those old fans. Now, I do believe that them dropping nearly everything from 4 and 5 was a pretty smart decision. The real best decision probably would have been to just disband 343 entirely, like hire a whole new studio and completely reboot the series. But alas, with years already spent in development, plus a budget approaching $500 million, that just wasn't an option. So a pseudo reboot it is. 343 now had the task of trying to connect these two games as best as they could, which would have been a fucking nightmare. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that writer's room. So now there's a huge gap between 5 and Infinite. And shit, you could also argue Halo Wars 2 as well. Because at the start of Infinite, so much stuff happens that it could basically serve as the first few missions of another game. It goes by so fast. You would think that they'd explain this in the opening cinematic, but no, we just get Chief getting beaten up by Atriox and thrown out to space, only for the game to cut to 6 months later. Of course, I'm saying this as someone with at least a higher understanding of what's going on here. I know full well that most people starting this game for the first time, especially the old Halo boomers who left this series by Reach, were expecting some sort of clean start or reboot. And instead they got this mess of a plot opener that didn't explain what was going on at all. Anyway, that's the plot. Just a bunch of wheel spinning. I would talk more about it, but nothing happens. Seriously. Nothing memorable in this entire story happens. It is just meandering and pointless busywork. Ironically, I think the best characters are the Banished because they're at least fun to listen to. At least they don't have any melodrama going on. Anyway, plot and characters are important to a Halo game, but they aren't necessarily what defines a good or bad game. I love Reach, but I will be the first person to admit that its story is just not there. Just a flimsy, bare-bones plot to connect between different set pieces and levels. Instead, the single player of a Halo game is far deeper than just surface-level plot. Things like gameplay, level design, enemy variety, gameplay pace. Hell, even with Infinite's currently dull story, if it excelled in this department, I'd probably be willing to overlook its flaws. Same goes for any other Halo game, especially the bad ones. Unfortunately, that's not what we get. So let's talk about the campaign itself.
The combat. That's right. To me, the most important part of any Halo game.
Well, in my Halo 4 review, I talked at length about how badly 343 fucks up when they try to add in their own faction to the gameplay sandbox, more specifically the Prometheans, which, to recap for those who haven't watched my Halo 4 retrospective, plug, the Prometheans had a multitude of problems. They were visually indistinct, their AI was annoying and forced the player to hide behind cover, and they were just unfun to fight. There was no strategy to fighting them aside from getting behind a piece of cover and shooting at them from a distance. Now, Halo 5 still tried to keep Prometheans, 343 were still in denial, but eventually with that game's plummeting failure, I'm guessing 343 probably saw the writing on the wall, so they just got rid of Prometheans entirely. Thank God! So we're just fighting Covenant. Well, technically they're banished, but I mean, they're just Covenant. We got elites, we got jackals, we got grunts, we got hunters, we don't have drones. Instead, we have these little hovering guys who are kinda like drones, except they're a little slower and they travel in smaller packs than drones. And finally, we have brutes, making a return since Halo Reach. Alright, I can get behind this. So how's the combat? It's good. With the grapple shot, I was expecting the game to feel much faster and probably something like Halo 5, but enemy encounters actually play out a little slower and more methodical. Firefights themselves are pretty good. The game encourages a lot of strafing and moving around. Enemies use power weapons and grenades to flush you out of cover spots, so there's a good incentive to keep moving around an arena. Grunts and jackals feel pretty much the same to how they were in the old games, just cannon fodder to easily headshot. I also don't mind the newer varieties. There's a few banished grunts and jackals running around with red armor that have different roles. I kinda like the pack mule grunt who just walks around with a bunch of guns on his back. I also like the return of skirmishers. Haven't seen them since Halo Reach. Here they're at least fun to fight. I got no complaints. Skimmers are a new addition, one that worried me at first, but after playing they really don't make too much of an impact. They show up later in the game and are basically the drone stand-in, except they're much slower, a little less versatile, easier to hit, but also sport heavier weapons. Anyways, on to the cream of the crop, the brutes and the elites. In my Halo 4 review, I talked extensively about how important this class role was in the sandbox, with these guys basically being player equivalents. They got shields, they got a variety of weapons, they have multiple roles and strategies. To me, I think they are the most important enemy in the Halo sandbox, period. So how does Halo Infinite treat them? I think it uses them pretty well, actually. I expected brutes and elites to be pretty much identical stand-ins, although they're a little different. Elites seem to be much faster and more precise. They're a bit slippier. They dodge, they back up, they flank. Brutes are a bit more tankier and a bit more reckless. Like they'd rather charge towards you while elites would rather hang back. I will say these elites are fun to fight. It goes without saying that they are leagues better than the Halo 4 elites. These guys are a little more slick, they encourage movement, not hiding behind cover. And I also love how simplistic they are visually. I touched on this earlier, but the elites finally have the same visual cues that they had in the older games, which helps dramatically in fighting them. Guys, I cannot stress how good it is to be able to tell what rank an enemy is by their color. For those who didn't see my Halo 4 review, there's one huge problem Halo 4 has with their enemy variety, and that is their weird armor color. I think with Halo 4, it's that the game had a weird brown tint on top of everything, so the color red would end up looking like a weird desaturated purple. Here, the slick smooth armor gives me a Halo 2 Elite vibe, while also giving them bright and easy to identify colors. You know what? I still hate the lighting in this game. It's pretty ugly. But at the very least, it is easy to identify elite variations now. Honestly, I respect how basic they are. Not quite the complexity of the Halo Reach elites, but something a little more fitting for Halo 1 or 2. Smooth armor, bright colors, I cannot complain. Ironically, as fun as the brutes were to fight, I think elites here were the standout. But speaking of, Brutes. For Halo Infinite, the brutes here feel somewhere between their Halo 3 incarnation and their Halo Reach incarnation. To me, they're more fun to fight than they were in Halo Reach or even Halo 2. I think everyone accepts that. But for Halo 3, I think the Halo 3 brutes are still a little better. They sadly don't have that wonderful shield pop sound effect from Halo 3. And instead it feels closer to the Halo Reach brutes, where their helmets and armor will kind of silently break off. And yeah, the combat is a little more in-depth than Reach, with different armor pieces like chest pieces, shoulder pieces, and helmets breaking off independently. Plus, there are a ton more brute ranks than Reach ever had. Honestly, these guys ended up taking center stage in Infinite, which I guess kind of makes sense. This is the Banished, it's a brute-led faction, so brutes it is. But these guys have a ton of variety, even more than the Elite. Although it's not overwhelming. Colors and armor are visually distinct and they stand out from one another, making every single brute identifiable, and they're pretty solid AI-wise. Hunters. Hunters might be the one thing I think feel off. They're definitely better here than in 4. They're a bit slower, but still their telegraphed melee is way too fast. So, I don't know, they're kind of a weak spot. I feel like the only way I've killed these guys is through cheesing them. Their only saving grace is that they rarely show up in the campaign, and I can only remember them being used in a handful of moments. So, all in all, I don't mind how they were handled. I distinctly recall me saying in my Halo 4 video that the one thing the Prometheans lacked was variety. Because in that game, you would fight the same 3 enemies over and over. But I can safely say that that issue has been solved by just getting rid of Prometheans and focusing on the Covenant. I mean the Banished. Honestly, I'm kind of impressed by the variety here. Anyway, this does make sense, however, when you stop and consider that this is the first mainline Halo game to not have a second enemy faction, putting it more in line with something like Reach or ODST. There's no Flood, there are no Prometheans, just Covenant. I mean Banished. And a couple Sentinels, but hey, that's just semantics. So, damn, yeah, this game is actually gonna make me say it. The combat is pretty fun. So from a purely gameplay balance standpoint, I'd say 343 did a commendable job. Because to me, sure, if I was anal about it, I could go through and nitpick how certain enemies don't mesh well with others. I'm sure I could find examples where enemies are unbalanced. However, from simply playing the game, I didn't find any noticeable parts that annoyed me. That's kind of where my headspace is right now. Sure, 343 absolutely threw in a ton of stuff into the enemy lineup, but so far nothing has really bothered me out of it. All the additions have been fine, fun to fight, and they don't give me a burning hatred of the game like Halo 4 did. In a way, this game's enemy lineup kind of reminds me of Reach, where that game threw a bunch of enemies into the sandbox from all 3 of the mainline Halo games and spin-offs. They were all thrown into the proverbial blender, yet the gameplay for Halo Reach is still solid. It's not unbalanced or unfun. There isn't an enemy type that they use too much of, or an enemy that's just useless. They're all kind of just fun. I'd say that applies to Infinite as well. They threw a bunch of enemies into the sandbox, yet there hasn't been a distinct one that put me off. Every single enemy encounter is pretty solid. They're simply fun to fight. At least until you get to the bosses, which... Yeah, let's talk about that now. I'm just gonna say it. Most of the bosses in this game are just unfun to fight. That's all I can say about them. They are not fun. Halo tried boss fights before. It didn't work. Bungie tried it in Halo 2 and then immediately gave up on it. Who knew that shooting a bullet sponge enemy isn't that fun in a Halo game? A game where all other enemies have visible identifiers to show how damaged they are. And I am not talking about health bars. I'm talking about popped shields, armor that's fallen off, or helmets that have been broken. This is the combat Halo has always revolved around, and boss fights just don't work in it. I don't actually mind the idea of having super high-level enemies in a Halo game, all with unique strategies and equipment. I think enemies that aren't bullet sponges that have shields and health just maybe a tier above everyone else could be fun. Like a super high-ranking elite in gold armor. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a boss like him, even if he was just twice as strong as everybody else. But this here is just ridiculous. Look how long it takes for the health bar to be whittled down. This is insane. I think what makes it worse is that you are exclusively whittling down a health bar. Like I just said, normal enemies in Halo will react differently at low health. They'll lose their shields, their armor will fall off, and then they might switch tactics and start melee lunging towards you, or go berserk. Actually, the one boss fight that I didn't mind was the Monitor boss fight, where he pops himself into this giant sentinel mech, and you can break off each of his 4 arms until he's vulnerable. This is what I'm talking about with visual indicators. His armor is visually breaking apart as I shoot at him. That's good design, but sadly not for the rest of these clowns. And they have so much health that oftentimes I find myself just cheesing them to try and break their AI, which sadly isn't that hard to do. But yeah, those are the bosses. Just kind of a lame inclusion. Could have been neat. I like the idea of having a wanted list of high-ranking banished, but just kind of fumbled at the execution. So that's the combat. I think overall I'd compare this to Reach, which isn't a bad thing. Not quite as satisfying as Halo 3 or Halo 2, also not quite as unique as Combat Evolved, but definitely pretty good in its own right. Hey, this gunplay is at least better than 4 and 5. But yeah, for a review that has mostly been negative, I genuinely think the best thing about this game is the combat, which is the best combat loop 343 has pulled off in any of their games. The real big stuff is with the levels. So let's talk about Halo Infinite's levels. What levels? Oh, you mean the level where you wander down a Forerunner corridor? Or the one where you walk through a banished base? Or, wait, no, I was talking about the other Forerunner corridor. Or maybe the Forerunner corridor that leads to a banished base? Or were you talking about the banished base that leads to a Forerunner corridor? Or maybe you were talking about the Yeah, if you couldn't tell by now, every single level in this game blends together. And that's genuinely a big issue with this game. There are no interesting set pieces, no memorable levels, none of that. Instead, it's all the same 3 repeated environments. Forerunner, Woodlands, and a banished base. And it's all repeated ad nauseum throughout the game until the very end. I seriously can't understate how repetitive these levels are. This combined with the slow story that goes nowhere makes Halo Infinite so boring. This is genuinely the slowest Halo game we've had to date. Nothing happens. Levels are just by the numbers. They're lazy, uninspired, nothing exciting happens. And if anything remotely exciting happens, it's always in the cutscenes. Seriously, the most exciting thing in this whole game is that opening cinematic where the Infinity blows up. An awesome section where the Banished are sending boarding parties onto the ship and you have to fend them off to no avail. Yeah, can you give me a mission like that, please? That's literally a staple of opening Halo levels. Why didn't they use that here? The one memorable level in this game that I can even think of was that one arena level where you fought off waves of enemies in a facade building. This is reminding me of another level, nearly identical to this one, but pulled off much better in another FPS game. Gosh, what could that be? Hey, do you remember the game Titanfall 2? It was a sci-fi FPS game with a fun linear campaign. It had awesome levels. Super bombastic sequences, not just full of awe and spectacle, but full of super unique level design and gimmicks. There's a whole level where you're parkouring through a facility mass-producing houses just to be used in a death arena. There's another section where you're able to hop back and forth into the past and to the present. I think my favorite level is this one, where you're assaulting an enemy ship in this massive ship-to-ship battle. Then you have to board it, take out its guns, and eventually commandeer it. Man, if only there were Halo games that had levels like this. The whole campaign was fast. The story moved at a breakneck speed. No time to slow down. We got bad guys to stop. Levels were brisk. Pacing gave a good amount of time for build-up, and just as much time for balls-to-the-walls crazy action. It's almost embarrassing playing Halo Infinite's campaign right after this, and I'm not talking about the gameplay. I like Halo's slower combat. It works for that game. More methodical and precise. Not quite as fast-paced or movement-focused as Titanfall, but remember, I'm not talking about the combat when I talk about Titanfall 2. I'm talking about levels and pacing. Because the one thing Halo Infinite desperately needed was a memorable campaign. It needed levels that were different from the last. Levels that had slow moments to let you take in the atmosphere, mixed with insane action set pieces that were unique and iconic. What I saw in Titanfall 2 is ironically what old Halo used to have. Fun, memorable levels with differing gimmicks and set pieces that made every single campaign a well-paced roller coaster ride. Again, people rag on Halo Reach, but that game's campaign is far better than Infinite could ever hope to be. And I know what a bunch of Halo Infinite defenders are about to say in the comments. I just know it. You guys are about to make the argument, but Andy, Halo 1 was just a bunch of Forerunner corridors too. Yes, Halo Combat Evolved had Forerunner corridors. But do you know what Halo 1 also had? They had a variety of levels and set pieces. They had levels that were vast and huge with huge bottomless pits, or smaller interiors that were a little more relaxing. Maybe some levels that were a bit creepy and had an ominous mood. No matter which way you slice it, Halo 1's levels all had very different atmospheres and tones. But that doesn't even describe the half of it, because Halo 1 had something Infinite doesn't have. Multiple biomes. In Halo Combat Evolved, the multitude of environments is staggering. Like, sure, the whole game is set on the same Halo ring, but Bungie knew how to spice it up. They had deserts at night, beautiful sunny green islands, cold winter canyons, misty dark swamps. For a 20-year-old game, Halo Combat Evolved is running laps around Infinite. So yeah, Infinite's levels are boring and uninspired, and as a result, the entire game drags. Let's talk about how this game looks, and also the atmosphere, because hey, I'm just putting this all in the same section. I was actually going to rag on the graphics, but it seems like they're simply a smaller part of a larger problem that I have with the game, and that is the atmosphere, or lack thereof. It's no surprise that this game is polarizing, to say the least, especially in the visuals department. Guys, I'm going to be honest. This game looks so fucking ugly to me. Unfinished even. Big, flat, open areas with no detail. Boxy, ugly level design. Horrible lighting. Oh my god, the lighting is so bad in this game. And an uninteresting, disgustingly ugly and bland world covered in hexagon pillars. Anyway, once again, before I start ranting about how ugly this game is, let's briefly talk about what I actually liked. Well, I like Forerunner environments. Seriously, any level inside a Forerunner facility doesn't look half bad. Little basic, sure, but an improvement on the other games. I will take this any day over Halo 4 and 5's neon lighting puke fest. Forerunner rooms are now dark and mysterious. There's not too much lighting, and there's a variety of metal colors, especially gold. This game loves its gold. So yeah, deep underground corridors look pretty solid. And lastly, there were a handful of areas in this game that looked pretty nice, just sort of pleasant. There weren't many, of course, but you could find them here and there. So yeah, that's what I liked. Yeah. The list of stuff I didn't like is a lot longer. First, as I said, the lighting's god-awful. I have no idea how Halo 1, 2, 3, ODST, and Reach managed to have better lighting than this. They all have static lighting, yet they look leagues better than Halo Infinite. Infinite's lighting is so butt ugly. How are there games 2 generations older than Infinite, 3 generations in the case for Halo 1 and 2, that managed to pull off better lighting than it? I remember when 343 released that infamous demo, a lot of the cope coming from 343 shill accounts,
naturally occurring Halo Infinite fans,
was that they'd fix it eventually with ray tracing. So my guess is that the reason the lighting looks unfinished is because it's literally unfinished. My bet, and this is something that a lot of studios do, not just 343, but I'm guessing that 343 were planning to just let the dynamic lighting do most of the heavy lifting. I cannot stress this enough. This is an ugly game. And it's not just fidelity I'm referring to. I hate people constantly saying that this is a graphics argument, like, ooh, graphics snobs hate Halo Infinite. Graphics snobs are always worried about fidelity over artistic style. I am not just talking about graphical fidelity. That's stuff that I don't mind. So to me, this is a huge straw man argument. No. To me, Halo Infinite looks ugly because its environment design is ugly. Because these hexagon pillars littering the landscape alongside these jagged floating islands look awful. To me, this really added a sense of uncanny valley to the world exploration. Something that, ironically, no other Halo game gave me. Because, yet again, I think 343 just don't aesthetically understand Forerunner design.
Here, let me explain it for those in the back, because designing Forerunner worlds isn't actually that hard. Anyone can do it.
So first, you take a scenic natural environment, specifically one that we might have back on Earth, that being a sunny beach, pine forest, dense jungles, huge vast deserts with massive sand dunes, snowy cliffsides, but the environment has to be just slightly exaggerated, just to the point where it can feel plausible, but it also seems really unique, like where it straddles the line between the environments that we have on Earth, but maybe a little more alien. Then you add geometric metallic buildings, towers, walls, and structures across the landscape, but you don't clutter them too much, like you have them all interspersed from one another. And that's it, now you have a Forerunner world to explore. That's all an open world Halo 1, 2, or 3 would be. A peaceful, serene, open world on a natural environment with the occasional Forerunner base sticking out of the landscape. And then maybe a vast network of tunnels and corridors underneath, I don't know. But I'm guessing due to either budget or a fear of attempting a just normal open world game with a beautiful environment, 343 opted to create these ugly as sin floating islands. They also decided to dot the landscape with these hexagon pillars. Guys, I hate to say it, but this just looks awful. And it's not even the graphics, it's just the art style. These environments are just horrible to look at. I still can't wrap my head around the hexagon pillars. Like, I'm guessing 343 saw a picture of those basalt pillars and thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had those in a Halo game? And then the thought just spiraled out of control, and now here we are. But it's such an ugly aesthetic. It's also one that doesn't even make sense lore-wise. We've seen what a Halo ring looks like when it's trying to rebuild itself. Yeah, honestly, I probably wouldn't mind that instead. I would much rather explore this Halo ring than this one. Just to me, this looks so bad. The landscape is just filled with these jagged Minecraft walls, and it completely takes me out of the experience. This game looks like someone messing around in the Unreal 4 engine. It looks so unfinished. And I know some people are going to defend it too. They're going to say that they like the pillars, they like the giant ugly floating islands, to which I would say,
hey man, your contract ended a year ago. Why are you still shilling this game?
and you could say it's subjective, but then again, I can clearly point to examples of a world like this pulled off correctly. To me, an open world Halo game should look like Halo 1, or Halo 2, or Halo 3. These environments should be natural and serene. They should look idyllic and beautiful. Give me my huge meandering cliff sides, my endless spanning oceans. I want hidden little islands to explore and uncover, or silent deserts with ancient structures laying beneath the sand dunes. A Halo world should be incredible to explore, and the concept of turning a Halo ring into an open, explorable world should be a feat of map design, not this generic slop that we were given. 343 completely dropped the ball here. In an attempt to make the game feel like Far Cry, they just ended up removing the soul from the game. Again, I think the best argument to why Infinite's Zeta Halo is so bland is to just play the original 3 Halo games. Look at how beautiful those Halo rings are, or how amazing the arc is. It's so disappointing because there's absolutely potential in this concept, and I'm angry that with $500 million and 6 years of development, 343 completely ruined this idea, and now it'll likely never be attempted again.
I have to talk about performance.
It's unbelievable just how unpolished and borderline unfinished this game really is. You would think that at least a year after release, this stuff would have been ironed out, but nope. It looks like 343 had other plans when it comes to post-launch support, which is nothing. This is easily the glitchiest Halo game to date. More so than even 5 or 4, or God forbid MCC on launch. I was talking about graphics earlier, and even though this game has pretty dated lighting, low quality textures and models, and just the overall appearance of a last gen game, it manages to run worse than even super modern open world games. I don't really have a powerhouse PC, yet it's good enough to run most modern games, at least at 1080p. Yet even now, I still see reports that Halo Infinite runs terribly, even on some of the better graphics cards. I'll also get massive weird frame drops too, like really inconsistent ones. There'll be random areas in rooms where my frame rate drops to like single digits, making it clear that this is not a performance problem, but just an optimization problem. Like this area in the campaign on the very first mission had super massive frame drops. Or this area, also from the very first mission. Oh yeah, small boxy room. What a super graphically intensive part of the game. Only a 3080 Ti could render this. What's more noteworthy is that this wasn't the case when I played this before. I have the most up-to-date drivers, so at some point one of the Infinite updates just broke this one particular room in the game. It's hilarious too because this is on the very first level. What a great first impression you're giving new players. This entire game is full of completely buggy areas. Levels are unpolished. There's also random parts of the game where your computer will just start chugging inexplicably. Again, just a weirdly unoptimized mess. What's hilarious is just how ugly this game looks from a visual standpoint compared to how well it runs. Because I'd normally expect a game looking like this to at least run well, since it's clearly not that intensive graphics wise, but nope, you get ugly graphics and bad performance. The worst of both worlds. One glitch literally broke one of my save games. It happened when I started a new campaign and I enabled a few skulls, not the Grunt Birthday Party skull, and then as I was playing, the Grunt Birthday Party skull managed to activate itself, completely on its own. It turned itself on, I didn't touch it. And do you know how I can prove that I didn't activate the skull? It's because back when I was playing it at the time, I did not even have that skull unlocked. I was actually replaying the game so I could collect all the skulls for a future lasso run. I didn't have the skull at all. It just turned itself on. And because I don't have that fucking skull, I can't deactivate it. So my entire save is stuck with that skull enabled. Great. But yeah, this is such a glitchy game. It also crashes on me many times. I don't remember it crashing that bad when I played it at launch, but replaying it now for this video, it has hard crashed on me 5 times. It's insane just how unpolished this game is, which of course makes sense because this is 343's very first open world game. If they can't even get a linear game right, I'm not shocked that they can't get an open world game right either. But yeah, a very glitchy, broken game. Halo Infinite is an open world game, and it is by far the biggest problem with the campaign. Open world Halo just doesn't work. At least not in how they implemented it here. I'm hesitant to say it can't work entirely, but it'd be so hard to make a proper open world Halo game that a company like 343 would never in a million years figure out how. Hell, I don't think even Bungie in its prime could figure it out. So if 343 wanted to make an open world Halo, they probably should have tried to make an actual good linear game first. Maybe start from there. But yeah, this game's open world just doesn't feel right. Nothing about it is fun to explore. Hey, do you want to know what Halo Infinite's like? Have you played any open world Ubisoft game in the last 10 years? Or just about any other open world game? Well, if so, then you've played Halo Infinite. Every single bad open world cliche is present here. Capturing outposts, blowing up fuel tanks at enemy bases, destroying propaganda towers, fast travel to your fobs. Look at the map here. Look at how many icons there are on this map. It's nauseating, which is a shame because the game itself is fucking empty and lifeless too. Because all of these are just tiny, meaningless tasks. Literally, the only things you're going to be doing are capturing fobs, destroying enemy bases, rescuing squads, and finding upgrades and collectibles in the open world. This is everything that you're going to be doing outside of the main levels. It is just so boring. The game has no meat whatsoever. To me, this is the turkey in Christmas Vacation. It's big, it's colorful, it looks juicy. Yeah, look at everybody. Aren't they so excited? Then you cut into it, and it's frustrating because there are fleeting moments in this game that give me a taste of what a good open world Halo game could be. There were little moments here and there that actually stood out to me. I think a famous moment was early on in one of the first levels, where off to the side path there was a Forerunner room guarded by sleeping grunts. This was completely off the beaten path too. You were not led here or anything. In fact, the objective points you in the exact opposite direction. So if you weren't paying attention, you probably would have missed this. But after killing those grunts and heading to the door, there is a friggin' invisible Spec Ops elite. This was fun. There's also a few scattered buildings and corridors that aren't marked at all on your map, that have a few enemies scattered around them. I think the reason these moments stand out to me is because they were completely unscripted, and they utilized what an open world Halo game should have, a big open world to get lost in. These were encounters that I could have completely missed, but the fact that I was just sort of roaming around, I found myself stumbling into them. To me, this is where the open world shines, in these tiny, tiny brief moments. Honestly, as far as I'm concerned, this should have been the whole game. I find it funny how months after Infinite launched, Elden Ring came out, and full disclosure, I'm not a Souls fan whatsoever. If you couldn't tell, I don't really like melee combat, but that game illustrated that the original Dark Souls formula works amazingly in an open world setting, where you don't need to constantly hold the player's hands, you don't need to give them objective markers, you don't have to point them where to go, and you especially don't need to give them a map littered with icons. Sometimes just letting the player explore on their own is all you need. Or hey, another game that came out in the last couple years that I am a huge fan of, Metro Exodus. That game is amazing. It beautifully showcases these large open environments that aren't too big or padded out, but have just the right amount of exploration to be fun. A map that was all about exploration first and foremost. No outpost hunting, no completing side objectives or leveling up your base. The whole gameplay is simply you exploring the world itself and discovering what's out there. This is what Halo Infinite should have been. Honestly, I've spent too much time thinking about how an open world Halo game could work, to the point where I may just make my own video about it on a later date. Who knows? That's future Andy's problem. So yeah, that's the campaign. What a fucking mess of a game. I can definitely tell what 343 were trying to do. They didn't want Halo 6, they wanted a Halo reboot. But again, they didn't really have anywhere else to build from. So they had to kind of make it a sequel to Halo 4 and 5, so now it's just this weird pseudo reboot that's not really a reboot in the first place. And now the fact that it's an open world game is very clearly just obvious pandering to me. Because open world games are popular and maybe we'll get a few more people buying copies because of this. Otherwise, I don't think a mainline Halo game deserves to be open world. It should just be a fun, linear campaign with a bunch of unique missions and set pieces. Hey, look at Titanfall 2. I can't even imagine what people returning to this series must think. Like seriously, what is someone who's stopped playing Halo at Halo 3 gonna even think when they start playing this game? This is possibly the worst format for a reboot I've seen. Either fully commit to it or don't do it at all. You can't try both.
Oh man, look at the video length. This is just talking about single player too. I can't imagine how long it'll take to cover the multiplayer. multiplayer. That seems like it would basically be its own video.